How many of you wear some kind of corrective lenses, either glasses or contacts? Right? All right. How many of you, and I'll try not to be jealous, do not? Look at these perfect people out here. For those of you who just had your hands up and your annoyingly perfect vision to boast about, one thing, and maybe the only thing, that the rest of us have on you is the unforgettable experience of putting on glasses for the very first time. It's the literal and incarnate experience of the words from Amazing Grace, "I once was blind and now I see." My moment came when I was in 4th grade. After adapting for far too long by sitting in the front row of the classroom, squinting to see the blackboard, I finally went to the optometrist. The eye exam itself was a mild form of torture between the puff of air that they shoot in each eye, the sting of the dilation drops, and the searing glint of light hitting my dilated eyes off the snow on a painfully sunny day. But when I put on my glasses for the very first time, it was all worth it. I was stunned to see individual leaves on trees. At home, I asked my mom if she had vacuumed because I could clearly see the individual fibers of the carpet. The world had come into awesome focus, and my days of eye strain headaches were behind me for good. Seeing the world through a clearer lens can make all the difference. Shifting this discussion to the theological realm, there is more than one lens through which we can view our calling as Christians. The lens that gets the most attention in our broader culture is the individual's lens. Let's call this the me lens. And through this lens, discipleship is about my personal relationship with Jesus. There are elements of this viewpoint that can be quite helpful. For example, this forces me to pay attention to and take responsibility for nurturing my own relationship with God. Whether through prayer and worship, the study of Scripture, or how I live my daily life, I have a critical role to play in my faith journey. And there are elements of wearing this me lens that are quite natural. It is hard not to think first about how a situation will affect me personally. Peter does this all the time. Last month, we celebrated the Feast of the Transfiguration, which is when Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up to the mountaintop, where he begins to dazzle in glory. And Peter is so moved that he wants to build tents so that everyone can just stay up there and keep that feeling going. And today, when Peter hears that Jesus will be killed and then raised from the dead, all Peter can think about is his own horror and grief. "God forbid it, Lord. This must never happen to you," he says. Just because it is at times natural to see our calling as Christians through the lens of the individual does not mean that this is the clearest way to view the life of faith. Take, for example, another phrase from today's gospel reading. "Take up your cross and follow me." Through the lens of me, this phrase sounds like a call to carry my own burden by myself and without complaint. Jesus carries his cross for me, and now I must carry it for him. There's something incredibly isolating about this idea, as though Jesus' willingness to suffer for me makes me eternally and personally indebted in ways that I can never repay, but should never stop trying. To paraphrase an overused sports adage about I and the team, there is no me in Christianity. As one Christian author puts it, our relationship with Jesus is not private, it's communal. That is, the center of gravity in our relationship with Jesus is in the church. Not in your heart, not on some mountaintop, but in the local gathering and global unity of Christ's church. End quote. Jesus consistently and persistently asks us to live out our vocation through the communal lens, or the we lens. Going back to the phrase, take up your cross and follow me, through the lens of we, the cross isn't about my burden. It's not about your burden either. The cross is the locus of the brokenness of the whole world, and it is the center of the global community of God. The cross is where God takes God's place in the midst of our collective brokenness. From the cross is where Jesus shows us that there is literally nowhere that God's saving love will not go. There is no place so far from God that God's heartbeat cannot be heard there. There is no experience so painful that God will run from rather than toward it. God will not be distracted or dissuaded from loving us and from offering God's very life in order to save us all. That's why we can't join Peter in saying, God forbid it. For what Jesus is going to do must happen. Not for me, not for you, but for everyone. Jesus' invitation to join him in bearing the cross is an invitation to hold on to the place where our collective hopes and sorrows meet. He's asking us to stay connected and present to the needs of the community. He's asking us to loosen our grip on our personal stake in salvation and trust that in letting go of our individual lens, we will experience something infinitely better. We will see God and one another more clearly through the lens of we. In what ways can you intentionally put on this lens this week? Catch yourself in a moment this week where your instinct is to focus first on yourself. Maybe it's when you're running late to get to the office, not that any of you would ever do that, and the world's slowest driver pulls out in front of you. Maybe it's when a friend's amazingly good news brings up a tinge of jealousy within you. Maybe it's when you read about a devastating hurricane and breathe a sigh of relief that you don't live in its path. Maybe it's a moment when you think your absence from this community is of no consequence to anyone else. Whatever the moment, try to catch yourself in it. Try to catch yourself looking through that me lens, and then put on a different pair of glasses. Seeing the world, seeing God's world through a clearer lens makes all the difference.